Before we start today's story, I'd be grateful if you could show your support by hitting that like button. It truly helps me share these meaningful stories with more people who might need to hear them. Thank you. The clock on the mantel struck 6:47 a.m. as Sarah positioned herself in front of the hallway mirror, the early morning light casting sharp angles across her transformed physique. 6 months of relentless training had carved away every soft curve, every imperfection she'd once hidden behind oversized sweaters and self-deprecating jokes. The woman staring back at her was a stranger, confident, dangerous, and undeniably powerful. Her reflection revealed sculpted shoulders that could carry the world, abs that rippled like armor, and legs that commanded attention wherever she walked. Mike watched from the kitchen doorway, his coffee mug in his hand. He studied his wife with the desperate intensity of a man memorizing something precious before it vanished forever. Every muscle she'd gained felt like another step away from him. Every confident pose in the mirror, another nail in the coffin of their marriage. "You look incredible, Sarah. I'm so proud of how hard you've worked," Mike whispered. Sarah turned, with predatory grace, her movements now calculated and powerful where they once were gentle and uncertain. Her smile was razor-sharp. "Thank you, Mike. I've been thinking a lot lately. About us. About what I deserve. About what I've been settling for." Each word was carefully chosen, deliberately cruel, designed to inflict maximum damage with minimum effort. The coffee mug slipped from Mike's fingers as if his body had already begun surrendering to the inevitable. It crashed against the kitchen tiles. Neither moved to clean up the mess, both paralyzed by the magnitude of what was happening, both knowing that this moment would be remembered as the beginning of the end. "What do you mean?" Mike asked, though his voice barely rose above a whisper. Part of him already knew the answer, had been watching it build like storm clouds on the horizon for weeks. He'd seen how Sarah's eyes lingered on other men at the grocery store, how she spent hours photographing herself from every angle, how she seemed to be auditioning for a life that didn't include him. Sarah laughed. "I mean, I've discovered what I'm capable of, Mike. I've discovered my worth. And honestly?" She paused, savoring the moment like a predator about to strike. "I think I can do better than this. Better than... better than... you." The words hit Mike like a physical blow, but Sarah wasn't finished. She turned back to the mirror, running her hands over her transformed body with the reverence of someone worshipping at an altar of their own creation. "Look at me, Mike. Really look at me. I'm not the same woman who married you 8 years ago. I'm not the same woman who used to cry herself to sleep because she felt ugly, worthless, invisible. I'm powerful now. I'm desired. I'm better." Mike's reflection appeared behind hers in the mirror, and the contrast was stark and cruel. But what Sarah couldn't see, what she was too drunk on her own transformation to notice, was the way his clothes hung loose on his shrinking frame, the hollow shadows beneath his eyes, the tremor in his hands that had nothing to do with nervousness. "You want to know what Derek told me yesterday?" Sarah continued, her voice taking on a dreamy quality as she spoke about her personal trainer. "He said I have the body of a goddess now. He said any man would be lucky to have me. He said I shouldn't waste my prime years on someone who doesn't appreciate what he has." Each mention of Derek's name was like toxic in Mike's veins. Derek, with his perfect physique and easy confidence. Derek, who got to see Sarah at her strongest every day while Mike watched her grow more distant each night. Derek, who was everything Mike used to be before his body began its secret betrayal. But here's what Sarah didn't know. Here's the twist that would transform this story from heartbreak into horror. Mike had been hiding something from her, something so devastating that it would make her regret those words for the rest of her life. Something that would reveal the true monster in this story. wasn't the husband she was abandoning. It was the person she had become. The secret had begun 6 months earlier, in Dr. Reynolds' sterile office where Hope went to die. Mike had sat across from the oncologist, test results scattered between them. "I'm sorry, Mike. The cancer is aggressive. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. We can fight it, but you need to understand what you're facing," Dr. Reynolds said, his voice carrying the practiced gentleness of someone who delivered bad news daily. "The treatment will be brutal. Chemotherapy, radiation, surgery if we're lucky. You'll lose weight rapidly. Your hair will fall out. You'll be sick constantly. You won't look like yourself." Mike had stared at the X-rays clipped to the light board, seeing his own life illuminated in stark black and white. The tumor was there, a dark shadow wrapped around his pancreas like a malevolent fist, squeezing the life out of him one cell at a time. "How long do I have if we don't treat it?" 3 to 6 months. Maybe 8 if you're extraordinarily lucky. But I wouldn't count on it, Dr. Reynolds replied, removing his glasses to clean them, a gesture Mike would later recognize as the doctor's way of avoiding eye contact when delivering the worst news. Mike had made a decision in that moment that would define everything that followed. A choice that was both the most selfless and most devastating thing he'd ever done. On the drive home, he'd sat in his car outside their house for 2 hours, watching through the window as Sarah prepared for her first session with Derek, seeing her nervous excitement as she tried on different workout outfits, witnessing her hope for transformation. "I won't tell her," he'd whispered to his reflection in the rearview mirror. "She's finally ready to become who she's meant to be. I won't upset her with my situation." So Mike had embarked on the most elaborate deception of his life. He scheduled chemotherapy during work hours, telling his employer he had a family emergency requiring flexible scheduling. He bought anti-nausea medication and hair growth supplements, anything to hide the visible signs of his treatment. He researched every side effect, preparing to wage war against his own body's rebellion in secret. The irony was crushing. As Sarah transformed her body into something magnificent, Mike's was being systematically destroyed. While she gained muscle, he lost weight. While her hair grew lustrous, his fell out in clumps he frantically swept away. While she gained energy, he fought waves of nausea that left him hollow-eyed and trembling. But Mike's greatest challenge wasn't hiding his illness. It was hiding his heartbreak as he watched the woman he loved become someone he no longer recognized. He would lie awake, listening to her breathing, knowing each day brought him closer to the end, and her closer to leaving. The months passed like a fever dream of stolen moments and hidden agony. Mike would sit in chemotherapy chairs, poison dripping into his veins, while Sarah sent photos from the gym. He would smile at his phone, typing encouragement, while nurses monitored his vitals. Meanwhile, Sarah's transformation accelerated beyond anything either of them had imagined. She didn't just lose weight, she became a force of nature. Her confidence grew with each passing week, fed by compliments from strangers, admiration from Derek, and the intoxicating power of finally loving what she saw in the mirror. But with that confidence came something darker, something that Mike recognized but couldn't name, a coldness, a calculating quality that hadn't existed before. The affair with Derek had started innocently enough. A hand on her shoulder here, a compliment there, late-night texts about nutrition and training. But as Sarah's body transformed, so did her desires. Derek represented everything Mike wasn't anymore. Young, vital, strong. Their first kiss happened after a particularly intense workout, sweat and endorphins making the moment feel inevitable. The guilt lasted only until the next time Derek's hands found her body, and then it became easier to justify. Mike was distant anyway, she told herself. Uninterested. Weak. What Sarah didn't realize was that Mike's distance came from exhaustion, so profound he could barely keep his eyes open. His lack of physical intimacy stemmed from nausea so severe that even holding her made him dizzy. His apparent disinterest was actually him trying to protect her from seeing him at his weakest, most vulnerable moments. "You know what your problem is, Mike," Sarah said now, 6 months later, as she packed designer luggage that cost more than his monthly medication bills. "You're comfortable. You've let yourself go. You don't challenge me anymore. When I look at you, I see settling. I see the safe choice. I see everything I used to be before I learned what I was really worth." Mike watched her pack, each folded garment another step toward his abandonment. His hand instinctively went to his stomach, where the tumor had grown despite months of treatment, where the pain was unbearable. The medication made him dizzy, but her cruelty made him sicker than any chemotherapy ever could. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you," Mike began, desperation making his voice crack. He'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, imagined every possible way to reveal his secret, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of watching her leave. "Save it, Mike. I've heard all your excuses. I'm done making myself smaller to make you feel better about yourself," Sarah snapped, zipping her suitcase with violent finality. "I'm done pretending that this is enough for me. I'm done settling for someone who peaked in college and never bothered to grow." Mike felt something break inside him, not just his heart, but his will to keep fighting. For 6 months, he'd endured chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, and countless procedures, all while watching the love of his life transform into someone who saw him as an obstacle to overcome rather than a partner to cherish. "Derek's been helping me see things clearly," Sarah continued, and Mike noticed how her voice softened when she spoke his trainer's name. "He's shown me what it means to be with someone who pushes you to be better, someone who sees your potential and demands excellence, someone who's as committed to improvement as I am." The implications hung in the air like smoke, choking and impossible to ignore. Derek wasn't just her trainer anymore. He was her confidant, her inspiration, possibly her future. Mike had suspected as much for weeks, had seen the way Sarah's face lit up when she talked about their sessions, had noticed how she dressed more carefully on training days, had felt the distance growing between them like a chasm that no amount of love could bridge. "Please, just listen to me for 1 minute. Just 1 minute. And then, if you still want to leave," Mike pleaded, his voice breaking completely now as he reached for her arm. Sarah jerked away from his touch as if he were diseased, which, in a way, he was. "No, Mike, I'm finally putting myself first. Something I should have done years ago instead of wasting my 20s on someone who was never going to be enough." The front door slammed with the finality of a coffin closing, leaving Mike alone in the house. He collapsed against the door, sliding down to the floor as the weight of everything crashed over him like a tsunami. The silence was deafening after months of living with someone who had grown to despise him. And in that silence, Mike finally allowed himself to break completely. He pulled out his bottle of prescription pills, staring at the label through tears that wouldn't stop flowing. "Take, with food, may cause severe nausea, hair loss, and fatigue. Do not exceed prescribed dosage." All the symptoms Sarah had attributed to laziness, depression, or simply letting himself go. The irony was so bitter he could taste it. While she'd been building herself up, he'd been dying slowly, and she'd been too blinded by her own transformation to notice his deterioration. Mike's phone rang, Dr. Reynolds' name appearing on the screen like a harbinger of doom. "Hello, Mike. I have your latest test results. Can you come in today? We need to discuss adjusting your treatment plan." "Is it bad?" Mike asked, though he already knew the answer from the doctor's tone. "We'll talk when you get here." "But Mike." You might want to consider calling your family. It's time to start making some difficult decisions." The call ended, leaving Mike staring at his phone with the terrible understanding that his time was running out faster than anyone had predicted. The stress of Sarah's abandonment had accelerated his decline, and now he faced the very real possibility that he would leave this life alone, without ever having told the woman he loved about his battle, without giving her the chance to choose love over pride. What Sarah didn't realize was that Mike had been fighting the battle of his life in silence, choosing to let her shine while he slowly faded away. But sometimes, the truth has a way of surfacing at the worst possible moment. And sometimes, the people we think are weak are actually the strongest of all. 2 weeks after Sarah left, she was living in her downtown apartment, training with Derek every morning and spending most nights in his bed. Her new life was everything she'd dreamed it would be. Exciting, validating, full of passion she'd forgotten existed. Derek made her feel desired in ways that made her marriage seem like a business arrangement. She'd gained thousands of followers, people who praised her transformation and encouraged her to never settle for less than she deserved. She felt like she was finally living the life she'd always been meant to have. The guilt about her affair had faded to a manageable whisper. Mike had seemed so disinterested in her transformation, so disconnected from her journey. Derek had filled that void with enthusiasm, passion, and a hunger for her that made her feel alive again. When Derek touched her, she felt powerful. When he looked at her, she felt seen. The contrast with her final months with Mike couldn't have been starker. But on this particular Tuesday morning, as Sarah was mid-workout at Derek's gym, pushing herself through a brutal set of weight lifts, her phone began ringing with the persistence of an alarm clock. She ignored it the first time, focused on her form and the burn in her muscles. It rang again and again, until Derek finally suggested she answer it. Sarah glanced at the screen and saw Mike's mom flashing insistently. Margaret. Rarely called and never during Sarah's workout hours. Something cold settled in Sarah's stomach as she swiped to answer, her hands suddenly shaking despite the adrenaline from her exercise. "Hello, Margaret?" Sarah said, and immediately heard sobbing on the other end of the line. Not just crying, but the kind of deep, body-shaking sobs that come from the core of human despair. "Sarah. Oh, God. Sarah, you need to come to the hospital right now. It's Mike. He collapsed at work. They rushed him to St. Mary's and they're saying—" Margaret's voice dissolved into incoherent weeping. "What? What are they saying?" Sarah demanded, her voice rising to near hysteric levels as Derek stopped his own workout to stare at her in concern. "They're saying he's been sick, Sarah." "Really? Sick? Cancer? He's been fighting cancer for months and nobody knew. Why didn't he tell us? Why didn't he tell anyone?" Margaret's words hit Sarah like physical blows, each revelation more devastating than the last. The phone slipped from Sarah's hands, clattering to the gym floor as her perfectly constructed world began to collapse around her. Cancer? Mike had cancer? Had been fighting it alone while she'd been calling him weak, pathetic, not worth her time. Derek steadied her as her legs gave out, asking what was wrong, but Sarah could barely process what she'd heard through the roaring in her ears. "I have to go," she whispered, pushing away from Derek's concerned embrace. "I have to go right now." The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of traffic lights and half-remembered prayers to a God she hadn't spoken to since childhood. Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity as her mind raced through 6 months of memories, reframing every interaction with Mike in this horrifying new context. His weight loss, which she'd attributed to depression over her success. His fatigue, which she'd seen as laziness. His emotional vulnerability, which she'd interpreted as weakness and clinginess. His lack of physical intimacy had driven her straight into Derek's arms. Every cruel word she'd spoken echoed in her mind like accusations from a jury she couldn't escape. "You've let yourself go. I can do better than you. You don't challenge me anymore." Each memory was a twist of guilt and self-loathing as she realized the truth. Mike hadn't been holding her back or failing to support her transformation. He'd been dying quietly while she'd been too drunk on her own success and Derek's attention to notice his suffering. Sarah ran through the hospital corridors like a woman possessed, her workout clothes still damp with sweat, her perfectly styled, hair disheveled from the drive. She burst into Mike's room to find him hooked up to a maze of machines, his once familiar face gaunt and pale, looking nothing like the man she'd married 8 years ago. The beeping of monitors filled the air like mechanical heartbeats, and the smell of antiseptic couldn't quite mask the underlying odor of sickness and fear. "Mike? Mike, please wake up," Sarah whispered, taking his hand and gasping at how thin it had become. The wedding ring that had once fit perfectly now slid loosely. A circle of gold on bones barely covered by translucent skin. How had she not seen this? How had she been so blind to his deterioration while obsessing over her own improvement? Dr. Reynolds appeared beside her like a specter, his expression grave and tired. Sarah recognized him immediately. Mike had been coming here for months, fighting for his life while she'd been fighting for the perfect selfie angle. "Are you Sarah? He's been asking for you. He made us promise not to call you until now. Said you had your own life to live," the doctor explained, and each word was another weight added to Sarah's crushing guilt. "How long? How long has he been sick?" Sarah asked, though part of her already knew the answer would destroy whatever remained of her self-respect. The diagnosis came 6 months ago. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3. He's been receiving treatment all this time, but he insisted on keeping it private. Said his wife was going through her own transformation, and he didn't want to burden her with his problems, Dr. Reynolds said, and Sarah felt the floor drop out from under her feet. 6 months ago, the exact moment she'd started her fitness journey, the precise beginning of her transformation from insecure housewife to confident goddess. Mike had received bad news on the same day she'd decided to change her life, and instead of fighting it together, he'd chosen to fight alone so she could become everything she'd ever dreamed of being. The room began spinning as Sarah processed the full scope of Mike's sacrifice. Every day she'd spent at the gym, he'd spent in chemotherapy chairs. Every selfie she'd posted celebrating her progress, he'd been celebrating simply surviving another round of treatment. Every night she'd fallen asleep planning her escape from their marriage. He'd fallen asleep grateful for one more day to love her, even from a distance. Is he going to? Sarah couldn't finish the question, couldn't voice the possibility that had become a probability. The treatment has been aggressive, and there have been some positive responses, but he's weak. The cancer is advanced, and the stress of recent events hasn't helped his recovery, Dr. Reynolds said gently. And Sarah knew he meant her leaving, knew that her abandonment had been another blow to a body already under siege. Mike's eyes fluttered, opened slowly, and when his gaze found Sarah's face, a weak smile crossed his lips despite everything. "You came," he whispered, his voice barely audible, but filled with a joy that broke Sarah's heart completely. "Why didn't you tell me? How could you not tell me?" Sarah asked through tears that seemed to come from the deepest part of her soul. Tears for all the time they'd lost, all the chances she'd wasted, all the cruelty she'd inflicted on a man who'd been dying quietly to protect her happiness. "You were so happy, Sarah. So confident and strong and beautiful. I'd never seen you love yourself like that before. How could I take that away from you with my problems? How could I make your transformation about my dying?" Mike replied, his words coming in short bursts, as if each syllable cost him tremendous effort. Sarah collapsed into the chair beside his bed, her perfect physique meaning nothing now, her transformed body just an empty shell housing a heart full of regret and self-loathing. I said such horrible things to you. I left you when you needed me most. I called you weak when you were the strongest person I've ever known. Mike, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You deserve to discover who you could become, Sarah. I just wished I could have been strong enough to be part of that journey instead of watching from the sidelines, Mike said, still trying to protect her even from his hospital bed. Still, putting her needs above his own, even as his body shut down around him. You never held me back. I held myself back for years. And then, when I finally broke free, I blamed you for my own insecurities and fears. The person I became, she wasn't better, Mike. She was just cruel. She was just selfish. She was everything I never wanted to be. But I was too drunk on my own power to see it, Sarah confessed, gripping his hand tighter as if she could anchor him to life through sheer will. She continued, the words pouring out in a desperate rush to say everything while she still had the chance. Derek was nothing but a fantasy, a selfish escape from a marriage I thought was holding me back. I threw away 8 years of real love for a few months of shallow passion. This apartment, this new life I thought I wanted, these followers online who tell me I'm perfect. It's all meaningless without you. Can you ever forgive me? Can you ever love me again after what I've done? Mike struggled to sit up, his eyes gaining focus and intensity despite his physical weakness. Sarah, I need you to understand something, and I need you to really hear me. I don't want you to come back out of guilt. I don't want you to sacrifice your happiness because I'm sick. I don't want to be your penance or your charity case. That's not what this is, Sarah insisted, touching his face with trembling fingers. Being without you these past weeks, I realized that all the confidence in the world means nothing if you don't have someone who truly sees you. Not just the body I've built, but the person I am underneath. The person I've always been, even when I couldn't see her myself. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried the weight of absolute truth. You saw me when I was at my lowest. You loved me when I couldn't love myself. You believed in my strength before I even knew I had any. And instead of recognizing that gift, instead of treasuring that rare and precious love, I convinced myself it wasn't enough. But it was everything, Mike. You were everything. You still are everything. The machines around them beeped steadily, marking time in a sterile room where love and regret battled for dominance. Outside, the world continued its relentless march forward. But inside this small space, two people faced the possibility that their love story might end in tragedy, that redemption might come too late to matter. 6 months later, they were back in the same living room where this story began. But everything had changed in ways both visible and invisible. Medical equipment now sat beside the couch, and get-well cards covered every available surface alongside their wedding photos. Sarah, still physically strong but fundamentally transformed in ways that had nothing to do with her body, helped Mike to his favorite chair by the window. Mike's hair had grown back, thinner than before but present, and color had slowly returned to his face as the latest round of treatment showed promising results. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, using words like remission and positive response that felt like gifts from a universe that had decided to show mercy after all. Dr. Reynolds says the latest scans look good, Sarah said, settling beside him with the careful attention of someone who had learned never to take a moment for granted. The tumor is shrinking, and your white blood cell count is almost normal. I had good reasons to fight, Mike replied, squeezing her hand with strength that increased a little more each day. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then spoke with the careful deliberation of someone who had learned to weigh her words before releasing them into the world. I ran into Derek at the grocery store yesterday. Mike's body tensed, old wounds still tender despite months of healing. They'd never fully discussed the extent of Sarah's betrayal, the physical affair that had run parallel to her emotional abandonment. He asked me how I was doing, if I was happy. If I missed what we had together, Sarah continued, watching Mike's face for any sign of the insecurity that had once defined their relationship. What did you tell him? Mike asked, genuinely curious but no longer afraid of the answer. Sarah smiled, and for the first time in over a year, it reached her eyes completely. I told him that I finally learned the difference between being better and being better than someone else. I told him that the strongest version of myself is the one that chooses love over pride, that builds people up instead of tearing them down, that sees strength in vulnerability and beauty in imperfection. She paused, looking around their home, filled with memories of both their darkest moments and their gradual return to light. I told him that I spent so much time trying to become someone worthy of love that I forgot I was already loved by someone worthy of everything. I told him that real transformation isn't about changing your body, it's about changing your heart. And my heart had been broken for years, not by you, but by my own inability to see my own worth. You didn't make me feel small, Mike. I made myself small, and then I blamed you for the cage I'd built around my potential. Mike brought her hand to his lips, kissing it with the reverence of someone who had almost lost everything and been given a second chance. We both made mistakes, Sarah. I should have trusted you with the truth from the beginning. I should have believed that your love was strong enough to handle my fear. And I should have remembered that transformation isn't just about becoming someone new, Sarah replied, her voice carrying the wisdom that comes only from surviving the worst kind of heartbreak and emerging whole on the other side. Sometimes, it's about becoming who you were always meant to be. Sometimes it's about recognizing that the person you've been looking for has been there all along, loving you through every version of yourself, even the ones you couldn't love. They sat in comfortable silence as the afternoon light shifted and changed, painting their living room in shades of gold that seemed to promise better days ahead. The medical equipment that had once seemed like monuments to mortality now looked like tools of healing, reminders of how far they'd traveled from the brink of losing everything. What would you have done in Sarah's situation? Have you ever let pride blind you to the love right in front of you? Have you ever mistaken someone's quiet strength for weakness, their selfless love for inadequacy? I'd be so grateful if you could take a moment to like this story if it touched your heart. Your support helps me continue sharing these deeply personal tales that remind us all of what truly matters. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to remember that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Sometimes it just needs tending where you are. This story serves as a powerful reminder that true strength comes not from what we can walk away from, but from what we choose to fight for, and that the real transformation happens when we learn to see the extraordinary in what we've always had.